In this video, we will show you how to replace your vehicle's master cylinder on this Ford F-150. This will be located in the driver's side of your engine compartment. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. Before we start removing anything up inside the engine compartment, you need to remove each one of your wheels and make your way to the caliper. On each caliper, you're going to find a bleeder screw. It needs to be opened. After you open it, go ahead and close it off. If it does not open or breaks, that's something that you need to take care of before you continue your process. To be able to gain access to the master cylinder, we're going to dislodge the upper air filter housing and air inlet tube. Starting along the front of the air filter housing, you're going to find two locking tabs. Go ahead and pop those right out of place. Continuing on, you should be able to take hold of the front of the air filter housing. Carefully lift it up a little bit. Along the back side, there is two small locating tabs that slide into the lower housing. So we're just going to lift this up, pull it forward, dislodging it. Along the front of the air inlet tube, you're going to have your coolant overflow hose. We'll go ahead and pull that out of place, a quick inspection. Continue on along the far side of the air inlet tube. We're reaching along the back of the air inlet tube here, and you can see where there's a vapor line that leads into the inlet tube. There's a small locking tab up along the top area that we need to gently pry up. If you were looking down in here, you're going to find a locking ear, and you have the exact same thing on the other side. To dislodge this, typically I just use a small pocket screwdriver. You can use a pick. Make your way up along the top where this tab is, and it should want to actually separate fairly easily, popping up. Once it starts coming up a little bit, typically you can go ahead and lift that up and out of position. For this one, it feels like it's going to come right out of here. Pretty close. Okay. See if we can slide that off. There we are. Now that we have that one disconnected, let's make our way just a little bit closer towards that throttle body and air intake, and we can dislodge the next line. For this one, it has a small locking ear. You'd want to reach underneath the tube, press it over, pull it forward, and slide this out of position. I'll show you what it looks like in a second here. There we are. Now you can see that small locking tab right down here. You just want to go ahead and take hold of that, and as I mentioned, push it over, pull it forward, slide this off. Follow the air inlet towards that throttle body. You'll have a 7mm headed clamp. We can remove that. For this clamp, we're just loosening this enough that we can slide the air inlet tube off of the throttle body. A quick inspection of this and we'll set it aside. Let's remove the air filter, a quick inspection of that. If it looks like it's dirty and needs to be replaced, now's a good time to do so. We'll set this aside. Before we open up the master cylinder, it's always a good idea to make sure you clean up any of the surrounding area, especially along the top of the master cylinder. I'm going to use some compressed air and a clean rag. We'll remove the cap from the master cylinder. A quick inspection, we can set that aside. Continuing on, we need to remove as much of the brake fluid as possible from inside of the master cylinder so we can avoid making a mess. I have a fluid extractor. Go ahead and reinstall your brake cap. Now we'll make our way down along the driver's side of the master cylinder. You're going to find the area for your level indicator. Let's go ahead and squeeze on this wiring harness. You're going to give it a little wiggle and slide it out of position. A quick inspection for corrosion, and we can set that wiring harness aside. Now let's make our way to the other side of the master cylinder. This is where your brake lines go into. Before you remove these, we'll make sure we put a collection receptacle under here. Let's start with the forward line. For this one, I'm using a 13mm. There we are. Once you have your line out of position, the next thing you need to do is clean and inspect that fitting. Confirm it's not rotted or damaged in any way. If it is, you're going to need to service that. This one looks fine. We'll set that aside, continue on to the rearward line. As for the rearward line, we're using a 15 millimeter. There we are, we got quite a bit of fluid coming out of there. We'll make sure we collect as much of that as possible to recycle it. Now we're going to start dislodging the master cylinder from the firewall. You're going to find that it has two 13 millimeter mounting nuts holding it in place, but over on the outboard side, you're also going to have a vent tube. We'll just dislodge that vent tube from its mounting stud. Quick inspection of that. We'll set it aside where we can easily find it. We will be reusing that. Now I sprayed both pieces of mounting hardware with some penetrant. A quick inspection of the mounting nuts. You will be reusing these. Now, while holding on to the master cylinder, we can start pulling this straight forward and up and out. There it is, friend. Now that we have the master cylinder out of the brake booster, the next thing we have to do is clean and inspect the area. If you see any fluid inside of your brake booster, you need to make sure you remove that. We'll go ahead and give this a quick wipe and a close inspection. Make sure nothing's rotted and damaged. Okay, let's get ready to install our master cylinder. The first thing we want to do is add some lubricant along our rubber seal where this will be up against our brake booster. Now we can start getting this in position. We're going to start bringing it over those mounting studs and press it up against the brake booster. Start on each one of your two mounting nuts. Snug them up. The torque for these is 18 foot-pounds. With that in position, we'll be paying attention along the driver's side of the master cylinder here. We're going to resecure our vent hose. Just align that with the mounting stud, press it on there. A light tug, making sure it's properly secured. Continue on to your wiring harness for your level sensor. Just press that in, listen for a click. A light tug, making sure it's properly secured. Let's remove the cap on the master cylinder. Now we're going to have to bleed out the air in the master cylinder before attaching our brake lines to it. To do this, you can have a brake line kit. We're going to have some fittings that go directly into the master cylinder, and the lines will make their way up along the side of the master cylinder and then down inside the reservoir. Got some lines here. When installing these, you want to make sure you start them in by hand, of course. Okay, we're only going to snug these. Now I'm going to flex this, bring it up inside the reservoir, as I mentioned. Now let's go ahead and top off the master cylinder reservoir with some clean .3 brake fluid. We want to try to fill this up to the point that we have brake fluid making its way up above the tips of the lines. Now that I have the master cylinder topped off and we can see the brake fluid is up over the tips of the lines leading into it, we're going to make our way into the passenger compartment and slowly pump the brake. We'll be pumping the brake down as far as possible. and then slowly release it back up. We're going to repeat this process as many times as it takes to stop getting air bubbles making its way out of the master. Alright, so we finished bleeding out all the air in the system here. We can go ahead and start removing our lines from the top of the master cylinder. Before you remove the lines completely from the master cylinder, we're just going to reapply our cap along the top here. Now we can make our way down to the bottom where the lines connect to the master cylinder. Let's drain this into our collection receptacle. Now we can start reinstalling our lines here. We'll start with the rearward line, which is the larger of the two. Go ahead and start that in by hand. We'll snug it up. Okay, right there is bottomed out. Double check, make sure your line's properly secured. Repeat the process. Right there's bottomed out. Make sure that's tight. Go ahead and clean up this area. After cleaning your mess and confirming there's no leaks in that area, we'll continue on with reinstalling our air filter and our air inlet system. When installing the air inlet system, we're going to make our way all the way over towards the throttle body first. We'll go ahead and press this all the way on there as far as possible. Once you have it pressed in and it's flush, go ahead and tighten your 7mm headed clamp. You can also use a flathead screwdriver if necessary. Let's continue on to our lines. For these, typically you can just line them up, press them in, listen for a click. A little tug, making sure they're secured along the way. Moving towards the front of the air inlet tube, we have our coolant hose, and now we can make our way over towards that air filter box. As far as the air filter housing, we're going to want to take the upper portion, we'll lift up on the forward end, and we'll slide the rearward end in. You can see that there's a couple locking tabs. Those fit into this corresponding area. While pressing that down, we'll continue on with our two locks. Double check, make sure everything's properly secured in place. Now let's go ahead and top off that master cylinder so we can start bleeding the brakes. Now it's time to bleed the brakes. We're starting at the right rear, passenger side rear. Once we're done at the right rear, we're going to go over and do the exact same thing over on the driver's side rear, and then we're going to make our way to the master cylinder to top it off. To bleed the brakes, it's going to be easiest with a second person. The second person will be up inside the vehicle, and they're going to pump up the brake pedal for us. They'll pump it approximately 3 to 5 times until it starts to feel firm. Hold it, let me know, and I'm going to open up our bleeder screw. When we open this up, we're paying attention to fluid coming out and making sure we do not see any air bubbles. We'll have to repeat this process until you see only fluid and no air. We have our collection receptacle under here, hand and eye protection. Go ahead and pump up the brake pedal, please. Go ahead and pump. You can release the brake pedal. At this point, I have no air coming out of the system for several times bleeding here. We'll go over to the driver's side, repeat this same process after we've cleaned our mess and reinstalled our bleeder screw cover. Now we'll make our way back up to the master cylinder here on the driver's side. We're going to have to top it off. As you can tell, the fluid is a little low. We want to bring it up to the maximum. Now I'm over at the passenger side front after finishing bleeding the driver's side rear and stopping at the master cylinder to top it off. Let's go ahead and repeat our process here. Once we're done here, I'm going to go over to the driver's side front and repeat the process, and we'll make our way back to that master cylinder. Go ahead and pump the brake, please. Go ahead and pump. We'll go ahead and close up this bleeder screw, make sure it's nice and tight, clean up our mess. You can release the brake pedal, thank you. Now I'm going to go over to the driver's side, repeat this process. Let's get this up to that maximum line. Reinstall your brake fluid cap. Okay, friend, we finished our job. The next thing you want to do is just make sure you pump up that brake pedal, double check for leaks. When you install the wheels, torque those to 150 foot-pounds. Close the hood, take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.